Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We will be getting started here in just a few moments. Thank everybody for registering for today's webinar, Restricting Amazon Sellers, the only true long-term successful marketplace strategy. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but I think you'll understand when we dive into this. We're very excited to have such an overwhelming response to this webinar series. We had well over 300 registrations, which is just amazing. To start off briefly here, let me get a few housekeeping details out of the way. So for everyone that has joined, you will be in listen-only mode for today and be muted during this session. This webinar will be recorded, and we will be sending out the link to the recording after the webinar is completed. During this webinar, please feel free to ask any questions that may come up in the Q&A area, and we will do our best to answer those during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. If we are limited on time, please know that we will follow up and answer each of your questions in a more follow-up and direct email directly with each person. So that being said, we are using technology today, and Murphy's Law that can apply usually says anything that can happen will happen, or can go wrong will go wrong. So bear with us, as our presenter and our co-host are in 2 locations across the country. So let's go ahead and let's get started here. So restricting Amazon sellers, nice controversial topic. So my name is David Howell. I've been in the brand protection industry for 17 years. Had the privilege to work with 353 of the top 500 brands and manufacturers over my 17 years. And joining me today is John McAtee, with president of TallRidge. Thank you for joining, John.
David, thanks for hosting the discussion. Really excited to be here with you and the audience to have a lively discussion. A little bit of background on myself, 13 plus years in e-commerce with a strong background working both in-house for brands and working externally on brands such as The Land of Nod, Crate & Barrel, Herman Miller, Steelcase, Human Scale, Hydro Flask, to name a few. Really have a passion for helping brands grow and prosper online in the marketplace environment. Really an exciting time to be talking about Amazon and being anywhere around that arena. The rate of change we're seeing from our perspective is only increasing. Really love what I do. Have a great team here at TallRidge. Dedicated, passionate people. Really looking forward to an active and lively discussion with you, David.
No, that's great, and I appreciate you taking the time. You know, I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to get this information. And one of the reasons why I really actively engaged with John over here in the recent months was the majority of the people that I've worked with or currently work with, this question is becoming more and more of a reality. And, you know, I'm only as good as the people that I'm connected with and people that I work with. And where I would like to think I have a lot of answers to a lot of these questions, a lot of these I don't. And I know that John, with his background and his experience, that he does. So what we're going to do is we're going to just jump right on here. And what I wanted to do is run a couple brief polls for the audience. The first poll, let's just kind of get a good sense of who's joining us today. So the first poll that I would like to do is, we got 2 of them here. Normally we only do 1. So I'm going to launch this poll, and let's see what we could do to answer some of these questions. So what is the percent of products listed on Amazon that are offered through a third-party seller versus direct on Amazon? So this is one of those questions that we get. So we'll take a minute, let everybody kind of chime in there and kind of talk about a little bit about what the discussion is today. So the third party or 3P sellers that are on Amazon, how many of the sales are attributed to those? So we'll give it a couple more minutes here and or a couple more seconds here at least. Let everybody kind of chime in. And wow, I'm just telling you right now, normally we don't get this kind of a response. Pretty good response here. So it's slowing down. We'll give it another 5 seconds here, John. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised to see what people are saying here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to close the poll here in 2 seconds. 1. Okay, let's close the poll and let's share these results and see what everybody is saying here today. So does this kind of shock anyone that's on the call today? John, what do you think right here?
Well, I think for me, it almost shows we have definitely some really educated, sophisticated folks on the call that have some experience, because we've kind of polled our own folks here, and I would say we see some people skewing towards the reality, and there's still a good high percentage of people that I think are going to be quite surprised by the results.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to dive in and we're going to give this answer here in just a few minutes, and we're going to run one more poll just for the sake of getting some more information that's out there. So let me ask this question: what is the percentage of worldwide online sales that Amazon has accounted for in 2017? And we're going to leave everybody hanging just a minute while we answer these, because John's the expert in this. So let's leave this poll up for just a couple seconds here, and I see everybody jumping in there. So these are two of the really compelling questions that we want to answer. That leads right into why the third party problem, why Amazon is just conquering so much of what they're conquering. So here, I'll close this down in just here about 2, 1. So let's go ahead and close this poll. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share the results of what the audience says, and then I'm going to take a couple minutes and walk through a few slides, and then John's going to dive right in here and answer some of these for us. So there you go, John. That's what we're looking at right there from what the audience perspective is. And what's your take on that really quick?
Pretty consistent. I think they're a very good group of people are kind of right on the number, and then there's over 50% that I think will be a little bit surprised. Excited to kind of get into it and talk a little bit more about it in detail.
I agree. Okay, well, let's get going. So let's talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to take the soapbox, if you will, for a second. So again, I've been in this industry for 17 plus years. I am a military veteran myself, so I have studied the art of war a little bit. And once you study something like that, you attribute a lot of things in your life, in your business, in your professional, as well as family. So this is something that really jumps out at me quite a bit. And I mentioned the word strategy quite a bit when working with a lot of my brands, a lot of my manufacturers, and with John and his team. So strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, where tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. So if you really think about that, it's that strategy, right? What's strategy versus tactics? How do you really build a good foundation for that plan of attack as we kind of move forward here? So what are some of the excuses, right? We hear a lot of excuses out there. A lot of people are really struggling with how to get started. I don't know who these 3P sellers are. I don't know who's selling my product. I don't know who's obtaining my product. How is this going on? All of the internet is too much, or Amazon is just too big. I've got so many sellers out there. How do I get started? Where do we go from here? Or do I have to go after everyone? These are some of the common questions that we get asked quite a bit. We're really going to dive into this, but know that even though these are very common questions, there's very solid answers to really how to approach this. And it's to bring the types of experts on with your strategy or what your plan of action is. And we'll be jumping into that a little bit later here. So what is the good, bad, the ugly? What is the problem? So in my career, starting with the conception of what brand protection was, and it's definitely evolved over the years. Brand protection back when I started was a domain name, right? Someone would hijack a domain name. That domain name then would be redirected somewhere else, right? You're diverting that traffic. Then it went to Google AdWords, and went to social media, and it went to content on websites. It's all diverting. If you can make money by diverting somewhere where they're supposed to go to where they're not supposed to go. And now really what's happened is the diversion is products, and we're diverting that consumer to a seller offer that is either illegitimate, or it's in bad faith, or it's just a third party that's not an authorized seller. So almost everything we talk about is diversion. And diversion causes many different things that we won't jump in today, but consumer confidence and price erosion and dilution. So a lot of those different things that we'll jump into. So what is the strategy? If I'm here to say, strategy is key, what is that strategy? Well, you have to have 3 core components when really building out a proper program, regardless what that program is online from a brand protection standpoint. And the Amazon world is no different. You have to have a good level of reporting. You need to have, the mark monitors or the map traps or, all these different types of technology solutions that are out there to help you capture the data that's out there. Then it leads into the research, investigation. Great, we pulled some data back, but who is it? What are they doing? How am I going to, enforce, which is the third one, if I don't know who they are? So I've been very, I guess you'd say, controversial when I say, if you do not have these three core components, you will fail in your strategy that you go to market with. And I believe that. And it's been my experience in the vast majority of the brands that I've worked with over the years, that if you do not have all three of these components, you will fail. So let me briefly kind of break that down. So if you have reporting and you're reporting very, very good reporting, but you don't research and then you just jump to the enforcement, you're really enforcing on things maybe you don't know. Amazon is a good example, eBay as well, and other marketplaces. There's a lot of anonymous issues going on out there. So you don't know who these people are. So how are you enforcing? Are you enforcing blindly? Are you sending it to Amazon? Are you sending it, where is it going? So you have to put that research into it to make sure that your enforcement strategies are accurate and they're getting to where they need to so you can have that action that you need. But what if you just have no reporting, but you're hearing it from a customer? That's awful, right? Because the customer is usually only letting you know these things if it's an issue, and that's a consumer confidence issue. So you got to have a good reporting because you're not researching. And then if you really look at the last piece, which is the enforcement, if we remove the enforcement out of that, well, you're really not solving the problem. So you have to have these really three core components. Now, I'll throw one caveat into this, that over the last year or two, I was working with a very top law firm, and I worked with an individual named Whitney Gibson, who educated me quite a bit, that said, these are absolutely accurate, but what about putting the proper policies and procedures in place, the reseller agreements, those types of things in place that give you the ability to have an accurate enforcement? I do believe that. So there could be another component in here that's probably the very beginning that allows you to do that. So what's the process? Like, how do we do that? The technology and people to make that policing manageable. And this is where we're really going to kind of jump in here. And I'm going to hand the reins over to John here in a second. But we have to understand, you cannot just throw technology at something to see it's going to fix it. And you also can't just throw people at it. You have to have a good mixture of both. You have to understand that technology will take you so far, and you're going to have that human element, if you will, and vice versa, because you want to be as active as you can be. And I'm going to say a little kind of a talk out of both sides of my mouth here for a second. But you want to be proactive, right? That's something I preach quite a bit. You want to be as proactive, but because of the nature of the internet, that something has to happen. So we have to react, and we have to react to something. So what if we do something called be very proactively reacting, right? Which is a little bit of both. So something happens, we take action very quickly, and we jump on it very quickly, which is in the Amazon world. And this is what John's going to be speaking to. By engaging with this, by restricting these Amazon sales and putting active things in place, you are going to get to that position. You're going to get that posture where you can get a good handle on it and you can understand that. So at that note, John, I think this is a perfect time for me to go ahead and, again, beautiful technology here. I'm going to hand over the controls to you, and I'm going to let you do your thing here, and we're going to answer a couple of those poll questions. How about that?
Good. I think we have technology's working. I thought we would set the scene, set the tone a little bit. We've looked at the audience profile, and so some of this I want to make sure we're kind of level setting as we build. So you're going to see some impactful stats that capture really the reach and influence of Amazon. A lot of you might have seen these individually, but when you put them together, pretty impactful. 55% of all online product searches start on Amazon. A lot of you have heard this is kind of the big concern that Google is trying to address. Google and Amazon really kind of going to war against each other. this really captures that from Google's perspective. People are going onto Amazon to start their product searches. Not too long ago, that was all done on Google and other search engines. 80% of U.S. shoppers buy from Amazon at least once per month. So that is 12 times per year. You're getting 80% of your folks buying on Amazon, and they're coming back and they're with repeat business. 64% of households have an Amazon Prime membership. They are loyal to the Amazon platform, and that platform is only growing with the products they're bringing on, which in turn will drive up more product searches. If people are confident that when they search on the Amazon platform, they can find that product, the click-to-conversion rate that we all know is so good on Amazon that the more and more products they bring on, it will just drive this circular impact of the influence. But as we go to the next slide, I think this is kind of the spoiler alert to one of the questions we asked. That nets out to really one of the most impactful stats. I mean, 43% of all online sales in 2017 were accounted for by Amazon. And as we've seen, you have a lot of folks saying this number is only going to go up. So if you look back year over year, the percentage share that Amazon is grabbing of this online market, of all online sales, is only growing. So we fully expect next year, if we're sitting talking to this audience, that number is going to be higher than 43%. 43% for a lot of brands and a lot of folks in retail, maybe some folks in government as well, that's already scary to a lot of people. Our discussion with brands have really changed in the last 12 to 18 months. It's no longer should they be on Amazon. That we don't get those questions as much. Brands realize they need to be on Amazon, and I think that we hear that word a lot. We know we need to be on Amazon. But the question we're really getting is, how can we go on Amazon without really negatively impacting the brand story, the brand image, kind of what we stand for, our ethos? That's really the question that we're getting more and more. And we want to talk next really just about another kind of level setting of third-party sales and sellers. Brands we speak with, they used to be surprised that their products are being sold on Amazon. I'm not here to tell you, we don't get that a lot anymore. Do we get a handful? Sure. I think what we get more surprise from brands are the amount of the scope and breadth of their products on Amazon. So if we do a simple landscape analysis for some folks we're talking to in early stage discussions, even when they get back that analysis back themselves, they have a marketing team, an e-commerce team. When they see it all in one place, they're a little shocked and surprised by the scope and breadth of their own products on Amazon.
John, really quickly, I want to chime in there. When we talk about those sales numbers and that percentage of capturing that market share, I did a webinar last year, on the retail apocalypse or retail Armageddon. And, it was like 9,300 to 9,700 retail brick and mortar stores closed last year, right? And I understand that a lot of those could be boutique shops, but there's that huge portion of consumers that were still going to those brick and mortars, whether it be the large Sears or the Kmart's or JCPenney's, these Macy's that were closing down. That might have been the holdouts, right? To still going to get those products. Well, I'm going to be just really amazed to see what that market share is going to be next year, right? Because that's a lot of brick and mortar commerce that now has almost no opportunity but to shift those buying online. So I think we're going to see those numbers, as you mentioned, jump up dramatically. And it'd be interesting next year doing a webinar like this just to see what the statistics are.
I think, and the last point really on kind of third-party sales and sellers is, and most of you know this, but really sometimes we get, how are people allowed to sell my product online? Or we get some kind of nuanced question, and some of the brands are more sophisticated. They know some of the tools, maybe brand registry or things like that. But the barriers to entry on Amazon, as we know, are extremely low, and it's really quick to fire up an account. And so, and David, I know you probably have maybe an example or a story that just how quickly or easy it is to become a third-party seller on any given brand's goods on Amazon.
Yeah, it's amazing the things I've seen, from buying pallets to obtaining containers, even, but even more recently, some of the things that I've seen from that arbitrage term would be, just walking down the aisle of a TJ Maxx or Walmart clearance and seeing them with the Amazon app, just scanning the barcode and seeing if they have a margin, and they could list it right there. So the omni-channel effect, if you will, on how you can engage through multiple, devices and venues to then list right on Amazon. You're right. It's just the barrier to entry to get on Amazon is so easy, especially as a third-party seller. So you're absolutely right.
Yep. Another thing we want to just a couple of housekeeping things, I think, on a product listing page, right? So here is an example of a detailed product listing page. Seller is Billy Bob's Bass. You can tell from that box, the top box in the middle of the page in red, the product's being stored and shipped from Amazon warehouse. So this is what we're calling this third-party FBA. You see the Prime Guarantee logo that's all important to all of you Amazon shoppers on the line. That's above that box. That's a critical indicator as well. So I want to draw your attention to the lower right box. 21 additional sellers are listing this product and selling it on Amazon. As you guys know or may not, the background of these sellers is very different. And as you can see here, the price listing from $138 to $154, this is just 3 of the 21. When you have, and we would say this is a good example of a product page. Have we seen product pages a lot worse than this in terms of number of sellers? Absolutely. But I would say on average, double-digit sellers, depending on the product, is something that you'll see quite often.
And isn't it true, John, on that, when a lot of consumers just instantly trust and believe that if it's that buy box, if you will, it must be an authorized seller and a legitimate product and of highest product quality. Isn't that safe to say?
Well, yeah. I mean, when they're getting the Prime box and when Amazon stand behind, first of all, when I click on this product, I look at the reviews. And so the reviews are a big portion we'll talk about later. The Prime box tells me I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it quick, and if my order is over a certain dollar amount, I'm going to get it free. And then Amazon stands behind their products. So the ease of return on Amazon, as we all know, is very easy to do. And so there is a lot of credence put in all those factors, but it's a subliminal message that the Amazon shoppers are reading. They're looking at those reviews quickly. They're looking at the Prime box. And then they're doing a little bit of research on the price, but a lot of the pricing's done for them. That's why the price is a big piece of the buy box, not the only piece, but a big piece of that. So all those factor into a fairly confident kind of click and buy experience for the customer. That's really the magic of the ease of checkout on Amazon.
Agreed.
The next, I mean, just to kind of close the loop on the third-party sellers, the message here really is the third-party sellers are really responsible for most of Amazon's growth. Spoiler alert number 2, the second, one of the 2 questions David asked, 83% of all products, that's not sales, but that's 83% of all products offered across all categories on Amazon are from 3P sellers. That's a really large number. And another thing, Amazon really defers and has a preference towards the third-party model from their perspective. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's an asset-light model. They don't own the inventory. The third-party seller does. They have these fees that they charge the third-party seller that are kind of fixed in nature. And so for both those reasons, that's very profitable, and they're not tying up their cash flow in the inventory. As you can see from this chart, really the breadth and reach of third-party sellers really penetrates almost every category. And that's really the kind of key takeaway from this slide. So I want to bring you back to that slide we talked about earlier, that product page listing where we had 21 sellers. And so what's the impact to you as a brand for having 10, 15, 20 sellers on your product? I mean, we'll talk about that here really. One of the big impacts is typically you're going to drive down prices. The Amazon algorithm, A9, A10, as some folks refer to it, if one of those sellers decides to lower the price for whatever reason, maybe they get a better, they find a better product price offering, they have a different way to access that product or buy that product, maybe they just want to simply take lower margin, they lower that price, everything else being equal, they will have a better chance of winning that buy box. It's not all dictated by price, but if everything else is equal, they will have a higher percentage of winning that buy box. So when you as a consumer search for that product, they as a seller will show up. And so other sellers have an option, either match that price or possibly lose out on the buy box. So, brand perception issues come up when your pricing is all over the place. Consumer confidence we can talk about quite a bit. Product listing and advertising content is going to be off-brand and inconsistent. You have 21 or 5 or 6 different sellers coming at this with a different approach and a different background to not only Amazon but e-commerce. So what is the story being told to that consumer for your product as a brand? That depends on, sometimes that depends on what content is uploaded from various sellers. The channel conflict that goes along with brand partners offline, especially for you MAP brands on the phone, you guys understand the negative impact that your relationships suffer with your current brick and mortar partners when your pricing on Amazon is 5, 10, or 15% below what the consumer can get at that at your store. We hear that from brands all the time, coming in, putting pressure on the sales associates to price match. The other thing that's not talked about as much is really something that's hidden, but we're hearing from more emerging manufacturers and brands, where it's harder for those brands to attract new retailers. Maybe those brands are trying to break into a big box or a brick and mortar retailer, and that big box retailer is looking at their products online. And if they are worried about landscape issues or pricing issues, they'll often push back on that brand and say, we don't want to sell your product in our stores because the landscape is messy. I think one response to this is allowing select third-party sellers, right? And so we can quickly go through some of the pros and cons. Some of the brands have said, John, we hear you. We've taken 20 sellers and we've taken them down to 5. And what does that do for those brands? These are known entities with some control. They have an assurance that the product is not a counterfeit. And one important point that we really hear from brands is they're able to maintain their pre-existing relationships with partners that may create value outside of the Amazon chain. We hear that quite a bit, where these guys bring value to our brand and things they do outside the online channel, and we are having a hard time cutting them from Amazon. So we think of those as legitimate pros. Cons that we'll talk about as we move forward, you're not going to avoid the race to bottom. There's still a lack of control. There's a lot of advertising spend efficiencies because now you have 6 sellers instead of 20. You're still bidding each other up. So it really kind of leads us to the next slide here, where we want to talk about, I want to share my knowledge in this exclusive third-party professional model. This is kind of the TallRidge model, and walk through kind of key advantages that we have experienced with brands over several years on Amazon. Improve brand control. So if you have one party working with you as a brand, you're going to reduce the MAP violations over time. You're going to have a cleaner presence. And if you're both working well together, you're going to reduce channel conflict with your online and brick and mortar partners. That is definitely one of the positives. The pricing stability, it kind of, it goes without saying, the race to the bottom, this brand image erosion that can often happen, that's one of the bigger benefits as well. The product content that we talked about, optimizing that, having one voice that comes really directly from the brand, because that third-party partner is a conduit. And if they understand what the brand story, the image, the ethos is, they can translate that on that product page so the brand feels like the customer on Amazon is getting that exact experience. And so what is this? What's the end result of these advantages? I think that's really spoken to on the next slide. And it's really kind of what brands talk to us about, which is this kind of incremental sales growth. So grow sales on Amazon, but do it in a way that protects the brand. So we call that, in short, kind of the grow and protect model. It's not sales at all costs, because we have a lot of brands that talk to us that actually, is there a way for us to put a cap on Amazon sales? And so there is strategies where you can offer certain products on your own .com site. So there's definitely a way to limit some level of growth, but all of them are talking to us about, we want to do this in a way that protects the brand and strengthens our partnerships outside of Amazon and even outside of the online area.
And that's great. Well, really quick, that's a great point, because when we start talking about restricting sales or cutting off sales on Amazon, it's the unauthorized sales, and it's the sales that are actually hurting your price and hurting your channel. In the end, this is about, just as you said, protect and grow on Amazon. So, again, to these case studies showing that by engaging in a fashion like this, by cleaning up that wild west, that 3P seller, you're effectively going to be increasing your sales in the right way and stabilizing that pricing long term. And that's really what it is. There's nothing here to eliminate your sales or take that huge hit to shut off everything on Amazon. You need to engage there in the right way. So it's a good point.
So we get a lot of questions. Exactly how do you do this? So this sounds great. We understand some of the concepts. So what I'm going to do here is it's like a 4-phase process. I will go through this in somewhat of a high level, because I want to be conscious of everyone's time and understand that if there's any specific follow-up questions that aren't answered in Q&A, that we can get to that. But selecting a partner. So if you're sitting there in a brand seat right now, understanding, how do I select a partner? Some of the things that I can tell you guys should be looking for is, it really takes a team. I mean, the team you're looking at, it's not one individual. You're not just talking to John McEntee. You're more importantly talking to the team behind him. That team is going to work as an extension of your brand's team, right? So what kind of Amazon experience and expertise do they have? What kind of SEO and content experience do the team members have? Do they have a media background? Were they working in and optimizing Google campaigns 4 or 5 years ago? Are they comfortable with case submission and seller removal in the Amazon back end system? That's not easy to navigate through. Is the team investing in tools and technology? People can get, you can get third-party sellers that get away with that now, but over time, the investment in technology and building that platform that allows their team of data analysts to scale is so critical. That's going to be one of the differentiators you'll see in the next 12 to 18 months. Inventory planning and logistics. The partners you're talking to in this model are going to have a significant working capital investment, depending on the size of the brand's business. So your product needs to be in the right place at the right time. Your packaging needs to be in compliance with all the Amazon requirements. And the last thing we'll touch on going forward is reporting and analytics and the transparency that comes along with that. The entering into the type of partnership we're talking about here should be viewed by you as a brand as a long-term relationship. So you're trying to enter into this arena where you have this mutual benefits, where you have like a win-win model. And so how do you get to that discussion? as a provider like TallRidge or any other third-party professional provider you'll talk to, they're going to need to do initial analysis, right? They're going to look at the brand's catalog, shipping costs, order quantities, do a micro and macro view of the marketplace sales for your category, look at the landscape. All of that research will bring kind of this, the parties together to what we call agree on a cooperative strategy to win on Amazon. And this is going to look different. It almost looks different between almost each brand we talk to. You then get to the point of, okay, well, we're on the same page. We think you might be able to help. You know, you have requested terms and condition and a partnership agreement, but that really comes after that research and both parties are on the same page. This next slide talks a little bit about the supply chain under the model we're talking to you about today. A couple key points to take away. I mean, the model we're speaking to is what we call a sale certain model. So if you're a brand, you're a manufacturer, no inventory is returned to you. Once it's sold to that third-party seller, the sale is certain. It's done. There's no returns. The third-party seller is responsible for all nexus, any sales tax collection. So the manufacturer completely washes their hands of any issues associated with that. I'm sure a lot of you have been reading about where things are going on the sales tax side. End of the day, it's a clean, reliable partner in place from an inventory planning and cash flow perspective. Onboarding. We've reviewed the process to identify a partner, come to an agreement where you have that win-win mutual benefit. Let's quickly talk about a couple of the factors from an onboarding process perspective. You're going to have to get that. If you have the right partner, they're going to demand that you get their service team up and running on exactly what makes the brand tick. What do your customers want and aspire out of the brand? That's the only way they can speak to those customers. Either it's over the phone, it's chat, it's email. You're going to work together on product page optimization, creating the best images, video. We call this A+ content that really makes your brand and your product page pop. And then they're going to be talking about your brand is going to bring in the marketing team to talk about what keywords are currently driving traffic on your own .com site. So let's build the right advertising campaign to come out of the gates and attack the right competitors, defend our own brand for people coming after us. And we'll start with this cooperative removal of the other marketplace sellers. This is difficult. It starts here before you go live, but the key thing here to know is it never really ends. It's a continual process. It often can be difficult. And we talk a little bit about this seller removal process on the next slide. Not going to take a ton of time here because this next slide you'll see this could be a whole webinar on its own. It really could. I know David could speak to that. Some key takeaways from this slide. Your brand must truly be committed to protecting their brand image on Amazon. We often work with some brands where it's just not a priority at this point in time. We say, you know, when it is, we'll come back and have that discussion. You're going to have initial conflict initially from this process. You need to be patient and determined. This is a long game to understand and remember. And you really want to choose an exclusive partner on Amazon that has experience doing this.
And it's important, John. It's really important that, you know, we talk about, you're right, this is definitely a webinar all in its own, or at least a seminar all in its own when it comes to that investigation side. But, you know, like that first box you have right there, the map monitoring, there's a lot of misconceptions out there in the industry. It's like, you know, all these third-party sellers are not adhering to my map. Well, it's important that a company has a map policy, whether it's a unilateral map or it's an IMAP policy. But you have to understand that that policy usually is only applicable to people who agree to it in your authorized channel. And we're talking about a lot of these unauthorized third-party sellers, which, one, probably don't know anything about your map, nor would they care if they did. And then engaging with the Amazon side, you know, Amazon's not going to listen to much, you know, map complaining. So map is used in a lot of aspects as a baseline and a way to monitor to see where that deviation is. And a lot of times those deviations then lead you to that unauthorized seller then you move down this type to investigate. So when you really look at that map side, it's kind of, the ID violation that's there. And you do want to keep your authorized channel in check, make sure they're adhering to map, but it's almost just a designator to say these are the unauthorized ones because they're not adhering to map and they're just trying to win the buy box based on XYZ. That's when you dive into investigate and clean those up. So,
yeah, and I think that really good point, David. The first part, I would say, the first 4 or 5 boxes here too. Understand that this really should be an automated process, right? So at TallRidge, we have a number of folks that are focused on this, but the process itself is automated, and the end result for the brand is they're getting a report every single week that's really kind of spoon-fed in order of importance on what does your landscape look like. And early on, I would say 80% of the sellers, they recognize immediately. And those are discussions based on what the brand's approach is. Maybe they have a 3-strike approach where the first time they remind their retail partners of the agreement they signed that the brand would not like to have them sell on Amazon. Then strike 2 could be a stepped up policy. But you'd be amazed if the brand has this information week in and week out, a lot of their partners move off and they respect the relationship, they respect the other channels where they're driving sales for those brands. It's the last 20% that David's talked about, and David has a ton of experience on this investigation stage. So just what any of you folks working with any Amazon folks now, these reports really should be automated because your team should be spending more time both as a third-party seller and the brand thinking about what to do next. The last phase of the process is this continual improvement, and you can get through the first 3 phases relatively quickly. The final phase is really this mindset, like I talked about, of continual improvement. I mean, the right partner that you engage with really eats, sleeps, and breathes the performance of your brand every single day on Amazon. It's really what gets them going, what gets them up in the morning to understand the beauty of Amazon and e-commerce sales is you get immediate impact, you get immediate results rather, good or bad. And so that team of dedicated and qualified individuals, we here at TallRidge, we call that eyes on glass. And so we're having eyes on glass, literally hourly, multiple people that are looking at things, looking at KPIs, having reports sent to them automatically. And it's basically just monitoring the health of the brand on Amazon. They're refining and tweaking advertising. They're going through and proactively managing reviews and ratings. A lot of the brands we talked to are surprised that a good portion of reviews that are put up on that site do not talk directly to your product or your brand. And so we can't tell you how many reviews we get where the individual says, I love this water bottle. This is one of the best products I've ever received. It keeps water cooler than any other product in the marketplace, but I got it 3 days late and I missed Johnny's birthday. And so for that reason, they rate it as a 1-star. That review should absolutely be removed from the Amazon marketplace. That is a review against Amazon's, in that instance, their logistics network. And so we automatically scrape those reviews. We look at which ones aren't speaking to the brand, and we have 90 to 95% of those reviews removed. I mean, the key takeaway there is the partner you're working with should have automated ways to review all the different aspects that go into the account health of your brand. Weekly sales analysis, we talked about this, reviewing sales at the product level, at the color level. This is where the product team comes into the call and really loves this information. And then we talked a little bit about that kind of weekly landscape report. I want to talk a little bit about the next slide talks a little bit about product listing optimization. And the key takeaway here is we at TallRidge think about every product page should be treated as its own business. Because Amazon, we call it it's a flat experience. So you're going in and you're landing on that product page, and that's your experience. So you have to have the inventory levels to support the growth. You have to have a consistent content format. You're always looking to optimize the listing for your target keywords, and the test is something we work with collectively with our brands on constantly. The devil's in the details to drive that conversion, improve organic ranking, and eventually improve your ad spend, which results in more sales, which is what, all this work is driving towards, more sales. But one of the last things we're going to talk to you about is reporting and analytics. And if you're a brand that's working with a third-party seller right now and you're not receiving a rich layer of reporting that you are involved in and you are working on to give feedback to them, as you move forward, you're absolutely working with the wrong partner. I mean, the data that a third-party seller can pull down from Amazon continues to get richer and richer. And so the transparency, the communication, and the ultimate agreement between your third-party partner and the brand on which KPIs are most critical to manage, not only on Amazon, but for your .com team, for that manufacturer, for your other offline marketing activities that you're doing, you really need to be having conversations with your third-party provider on a regular basis. And we listed here some key KPIs that you can speak to. Those ones probably won't surprise you. We also just gave you some examples of the reports. We'll kind of spin through a couple of these, but as we're going through them, a true differentiator, the reporting analytics is where you really start to add a lot of value. You as a brand should have significant control and influence over these. There should be complete transparency. This is where a lot of the magic can happen. We've had a lot of partners in the marketing side. When they first were introduced to TallRidge, they weren't big fans because TallRidge represents the marketplace of Amazon. But those .com teams internally over time appreciated the insights and the data they were getting that helped eventually drive more sales, more eyeballs to their own site. We work with the product development teams as they're working on the new product pipeline. They'll look at the reviews and understand if, let's say, in the example of a water bottle, if there's a cap or if there's a leaking issue, the TallRidge team is usually the first one, because of the sheer volume on Amazon, to alert the product team at the brand that they have an issue. You get the logistics and operations team looking at the product performance and any packaging issues. And finally, your sales and distribution team are working on the channel management side. And if there's a story they can tell about a cleaned up landscape or better pricing on Amazon, that's a great way for them to go out and talk to their brick and mortar partners offline and really turn the tables in a positive way toward that offline partner to say, we're no longer seeing price erosion on Amazon. We have helped stabilize that, and we are working with you as a brick and mortar retail partner to help you better drive performance at your own location. So the sales teams also use this data in going back and talking to their folks. I think the big takeaway on this last slide is really, we're looking to protect your brand and grow the business. We call it protect and grow. I talked about that a little bit earlier. Each one of the aspects on this slide is really kind of dependent on the other. We think about it as the circles need to be spinning at the right time and the right rate for all this to be working together. At the end of the day, the key takeaway we want you to take away from this discussion is it really takes a team of experts to win on Amazon. You, from the brand side, absolutely have the ability to work through some of the things we articulated for you. Hopefully there's some things you learned and expectations that you should be putting on a partner when that partner's saying they can help you on Amazon. Because it's not often as easy as it looks, and that team needs to be really educated and detailed on what the key steps are.
Absolutely, John. And I'm gonna kind of jump in here and kind of chime in on some stuff that's really important. So when you talk about the reporting and the analytics, and this is one of the reasons why all the questions I've been getting are receiving from all the brands that I've worked with and I'm currently working with. They're asking me this whole, authorized third party engagement. When we start looking at these reporting and analytics and these examples that are here, the key is, brands are already, these manufacturers, these director of e-commerce and sales are already inundated with so many different things that are getting hit up on. And one thing that John's educated me, and as well as Greg, is, there's a lot of the work that the professional third-party seller should be taking on. And part of this is these reporting analytics and creating these charts and not just dumping them on the brands themselves and saying, here's all the numbers. It's actually having that engagement on a regular basis, whether that's weekly or quarterly or monthly or however that engagement is, but going through and showing those levels of success, diving in and taking a look at here's what's been successful, that test, and that vicious circle that you keep talking about. It's important to understand that in a professional third-party exclusivity environment, which is a lot of what I'm recommending here, and that's why I brought John on, is you really got to look at this and say, how are they going to show and how are they going to protect my brand and show that growth? Well, these are the types of things where it's not just us telling you or seeing that, but there'll be volume, there'll be a lot of that, the product purchasing and those things to show that. But this is where the analytics come in and that due diligence to show, well, we're going to show you exactly how it is, and we're going to deliver this to you and not make you go out and get this data yourself and then just send it in an email and say good luck and review it. So I thought that was very important and very critical. And John, you've done a lot to educate me on how far you go to really break down those analytics to show every aspect of that success there. Isn't that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you develop, as I'm speaking to the brands now, when you develop that rapport with the right partner, the logistics, the inventory, the product page optimization, it continues. But taking it to the next level is leveraging the insights on the platform itself for Amazon, and then allowing that brand to no longer be blind to all the transactions that are occurring on an hourly and daily basis for their products, and putting a strategy together on what that should mean for them in areas outside of Amazon. And that's when the partnership gets much richer, it gets connected at much different levels, and quite frankly, from a TallRidge perspective, that's what we really aspire to. And that's why it's a long-term partnership, and that's why we're trying to only, partner with the folks that it makes sense on both sides. Because otherwise, it's just transactional, and that's not really where the value add is.
Agreed. And again, we're here to give information. We're here to educate the marketplace on what a process should be, a process that we recommend would be to engage with a third party, an exclusive third party seller. And we got a couple questions that are coming in that we want to answer, but a lot of them are going to say, just how do I get started? I mean, just pick up the phone and call. I mean, the best way for all this to happen is, again, like John just said, if it makes sense for both, there's a level of engagement that can be there, but you have to start that conversation. You have to have that level of a consultative engagement with a third-party seller, an exclusive third-party seller, and understand if it's best for your business. And again, I'm sitting here saying that, what I think from an educational standpoint, I mean, TallRidge brings so much value to educate here, and now it's on the brands to understand, how to move forward in that exclusive third-party sale here. So again, this isn't a sales pitch by any means to sell TallRidge. It's more of an educational to say, bring the right people to the table that understand this business. So what we want to do is we got a couple questions. We're running the top of the hour here, so I want to be very cognizant of the fact. So I got two questions here that I think have popped up a couple different times. One's from Robert, and John, I'll let you answer this. It says, what does the transition process look like for a brand that is interested in moving forward in this type of a model that we talked about today? So if you could really quickly maybe just break that down, like what's that process look like?
Yep. I mean, first and foremost, we completely understand it's usually a very big decision for the brand. So over time, with the growth we talked about on Amazon, the Amazon channel usually is or is becoming a very large selling channel with a lot of visibility up the organization. So we usually hear that from folks. This is a very big decision. We're not going to take it lightly. The sensitivity to the current distributor and retail partnerships they have in place is always a concern. It's something that that we hear quite a bit. You know, that's one of the reasons why we've often worked with brands on a phased approach, where we'll look at a specific family of products. It needs to make sense. We just take one product within a family, it's probably not going to be the best customer experience. But if we take a complete family offering and we work together on a lot of the areas we just went through together as a brand and TallRidge, we can kind of crawl, walk, run. And that's a lot. And so we can sometimes show the parties within the brand the results they need to see. We could also, it's also a way, maybe there's a new product offering, and instead of immediately cutting off their current distributors or partners, the new product offering goes on Amazon and that goes through TallRidge. So that phased approach has really worked well. And there's this seamless transition where we often put in products into Amazon warehouses, and those products are currently being duplicated by, maybe they're being 1P, they're sold to Amazon right now, or maybe they're being sold by another third-party seller. And over time, as that product gets depleted on Amazon, the TallRidge listings will kind of light up. So think about it, the other listings go orange, red, and the TallRidge listings turn green. So there's really a seamless way to do that on specific products. And that's important because a lot of brands worry about having this big hiccup period. So we kind of work with brands on that because it's extremely sensitive. We're often talking to very senior folks with these brands, and if something goes wrong in the transition, they're often left to defend that with their team back at the home office.
Exactly. So we only got about 3 or 4 minutes here, and I got a couple things I want to go over. There's one last question. I'm sure you can answer it fairly quickly. How does a professional 3P seller, this is from Vicky, how do they normally charge for their services, or what do you see as a structure there?
Yeah, I mean, you should, as a brand, there's a couple different ways you can think about it. There's a typical agency model where they might be doing a portion of what we talked about today, and on Amazon, you're often going to get quoted those as a percentage of sales. So if that agency helps you in any shape, way, or form grow sales, the brand will agree with that agency on what's the right percentage of sales. There's also some folks that might even be doing, we call it the percentage of spend model. This is the old media model where some folks might be helping you on the Google side right now, you folks running your .com site, and those folks are charged as a percentage of media spend. So they don't get the top line upside, but they're helping you manage and really optimize just the advertising piece. What we talked about today in that kind of sales certain model, we look like an authorized retailer. We buy from the manufacturer at wholesale, and we resell at MAP. We make our bottom line profit taking the gross margin and deducting off all the Amazon expenses. We can walk through it with any of those individually. We're very open and transparent on exactly what those are. And the last piece after the fees is you take off the advertising that we're helping to support with on the brand. So we look like another authorized retailer that just happens to help that brand focus on a very large and impactful channel.
That's great. I appreciate it, John. And following up real quick here, we got some handouts and some guides and resources. Reach out to us after the webinar. Reach out to myself. We're going to be providing a kind of investigation basics document. So kind of go down and you can do some investigations on your own, kind of a handbook. And there's also a case study and white paper that TallRidge can share that shows some of these examples that are there. And right here is John and Maggie at TallRidge. You can capture their information here. And what I want to do is kind of close this out. And I want to let everybody know, thank you for taking your time today. I know your time is valuable. I know it's a very hot and controversial topic. for anyone that would like any more 3P seller information, anything like that, we'd be glad to help. And we're at the top of the hour here. So have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, John, for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. And we are here to answer any questions after the webinar at any time. So please feel free to reach out to us. So on that note, have a great afternoon. And the session will be over and closing now. Thank you very much.